the session has adopted this policy. A lot of it is normal stuff. Some things are new, and those are some of the things I want to highlight specifically today. There will be more words on the screen than we are actually going to talk about, but again, this will be other times for other trainings as well. If you have questions at any point, do feel free to raise your hand and flag me down. If there's something that you need clarification on, I am going to do my best to leave some time at the end for questions and a little processing, because some of the issues that we're going to talk about are not, they're not fun. Like I said, they're things that we hope, this whole policy is basically things we hope we never have to know, actually. But kind of like being on a plane and needing to know how to get off in an emergency, you do want to pay attention just in case you're ever in that situation. And like Felipe said earlier today, we don't want to be trying to figure out where the exits are when a fire is already happening, for example. This is part of why we had the event last week as well, so that people can familiarize themselves with the building, where things are happening, where groups of people are meeting on Sunday mornings, so that we as a whole community that are here are aware and prepared to keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. So a lot of this policy is fairly basic.
And I would just add that one of the things I hope that will come out of this discussion is that we all just take time to think about this at home. If you're an usher, think about your scenario on Sunday morning and what you would do in an emergency. Are there people who are going to need help out of the sanctuary? If you're a Sunday school teacher, thinking in terms of your classroom and the way you teach, some of this is not just read it and be done. Some of it is meant to have us all thinking about, if there's an emergency, what needs to happen and how we can all be a part of making that happen.
So there's three main sections to the policy. There's a table of contents at the beginning, but I'll go over it briefly. There's a large section on suspicious or potentially violent situations, how to handle some of those, some communication tips for dealing with a person you may not know and you don't exactly know what their issue is or how you can respond well. Potentially violent situations, if there's some kind of intruder or a hostage situation, which sounds like something that you're only going to think of in an action movie, but think of family dynamics and the fact that we have children here and in diverse families and mixed families and a preschool full of children who everyone has complicated family dynamics sometimes, and some of them get more serious than others. So that's a particular way to look at this kind of situation. There could be others, but that's kind of where some of this is coming from. And then one of the new things that we have added are procedures for a suspected shooter and an active shooter. This again is some of the hard stuff that we hope we never have to know, but we do want to be prepared because we're not oblivious to what is happening in the world, and we're not oblivious to our reality here. A procedure for bomb threat and a procedure if someone is missing in the building, presumably a child. There is another section on natural and property emergencies. So this is some of the procedures and policies that we had before, but they weren't really all in one place, in one accessible document, so that it could be studied and looked up if you ever need to know. So these are things like where to evacuate the church, what to do in case of severe weather, fire, gas leaks, chemical spills, equipment failure, and how to shut off things in an emergency, like if the sprinkler goes off when it's not supposed to be off. There is a final section on medical emergencies that cover what to do if it's severe enough to call an ambulance, and just if you need to clean up something that is not necessarily safe. At the very end, there's some more contact information. There's a list in there of all of the people that you would need to call, including staff members, if there's anything that goes wrong, like if the elevator doesn't work, the elevator company that we use is in there, things like that. There's also some reporting forms. So if there's anything that happens, a hostile stranger, just an altercation at church, anything like that, there's a reporting form in there and a little bit more information at the end too. So I'm going to spend some more time, like I said, on some of these. These first two sections are a little bit more substantial than the last. So we will go straight into dealing with a person acting suspiciously or disruptively. In the policy, I'll skip over some of this, but we do have in there suggestions for some things to think through. Obviously, and I think this is a good one to frame our thinking for the entire rest of the policy, that in any kind of emergency or anything strange that you're dealing with, try your best to stay calm, collect your thoughts, observe as much as you can, assess the level of severity of what's happening, and don't risk your safety or the safety of someone else. Think through some of the things that may result. So, and just sorry, just saw the Wi-Fi thing. I'm not sure if they can hear us or not, but I'm going to keep going. If the situation doesn't appear to be dangerous, we do have some suggestions on how to de-escalate an interaction. So some of these are common sense, but I do encourage you all to read through some of this. And like Sunny said, it's not necessarily just reading it to read it, but read it and think through what are the things that you volunteer for in the church? Where physically are you in the church? What kind of people do you talk to? You know, are you an usher normally? Are you not? All those kinds of things. Think through these things individually and how this applies to you. So just some obvious things. Try to move them away from people so you can have a conversation. Staying calm, use a strong voice. Don't act intimidating or threatening to further upset them. Be respectful, things like that are kind of common sense. We also have, let me skip to this actually. Specific communication tips, like example questions to ask somebody to kind of reframe whatever the situation is that you're in. Is something the matter? Try to find out what it is that has agitated them or is the issue, if there is one. Take the time to explain things to them. It may be somebody that just doesn't know they're not supposed to come in that door, or they're supposed to meet somebody and they're missing and they're frantic about it. It could be something totally not suspicious or disruptive, but it's strange. So ask questions, stay calm, all those kinds of things. So I encourage you to check through that and think through that again. Skipping on to potentially violent situations. This, again, is important to think of, not necessarily in an action movie kind of way, but in very mundane ways that these kind of situations could occur. If a lot of it is kind of obvious, you know, if you can call 911, if that seems to be needed, do that as soon as you safely can. That's consistent for a lot of these emergencies too. And notify someone, staff member, ushers, deacons, pastor, again, staff members, whoever is there that you think may have the most access to additional help or knowledge of the person or situation, anything like that. If there are weapons that you know of that are there, that are presented, don't attempt to engage the person physically. You may want to stay calmly speaking to them if that seems effective. Do what you can to get help, again, the attention of someone else. Notify staff or call or text 911. That's an important one to remember, that I think just looking around at the age of folks in this room, remembering that texting 911 is one of the safer ways to get a hold of them in a lot of the situations that we're worried about. You can do that very chillly and without a lot of alerting folks. So keep that in mind as we think through a variety of these situations.
The police also recommend that if you text 911, you turn the sound off of your phone as well.
Sunny, can you speak up into this so people online can hear you?
The police also recommend that if you're going to text 911, you turn the sound off of the ringer off of your phone if you're in a dangerous situation.
Add something real
Yeah.
quick. Just not the complete, I'm not muffled. If in doubt, like, it's okay to call or text 911. The police department, they say a lot of times, there are times when people don't call or text when they should. And then the ones that they get are some of the people that shouldn't and do, but they always, if in doubt, it's okay to call. They usually are pretty quick at responding. So yeah, just if you're worried, it's okay.
Yeah, sorry, Stephanie was just saying that the police advise to go ahead and text or call if you feel any need at all. There are often people that don't and miss the opportunity of getting help. So they'd rather be called than have to be called later for something more serious.
Depending on what the situation is, you can also, when you contact 911, tell them what part of the church the emergency is in, because this is a big place for the police to wander around looking for where the problem is. We've given emergency management a blueprint of the church labeled with all the different rooms and areas and door numbers. So if you, for example, say that, you know, something is happening in the preschool area or in the laws room or the sanctuary, that they have all that, and any responding fire or police officer will actually have that in their squad car, will have that blueprint of the church.
This is yeah, so probably everybody already knows this, but just in case, if you have an iPhone, on the left-hand side, there's a single button or a single lever here. And if you press it down, there's a little red line that shows, and that means that you're on mute. So if you need to kill the sound in your on silence, sorry, not on mute. You're right. Sorry, on silence. Thank you, John. But that's a quick way to do it. You don't have to scroll through all your settings and do this. This is immediate and it makes things silent. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Whatever your technology is, make sure you're familiar with it. I mean, for your own convenience, but really it can be helpful in an emergency, and the quickest way to dial 911, you can send emergency signals on your phone sometimes too. So familiarize yourself with that. This is one of the things that I want to spend a little more time on since it is newer. And I am going to be honest that, again, looking around at the ages of people in this room, if you're much younger than you all are, or have children in school right now, you're going to be unfortunately super familiar with the procedures for an active shooter drill. The kids, I was talking to some of the teachers yesterday, or people that work in the schools, and discussing how this is so normal for them. They do a training on this for the children, teenagers, everybody, staff, every year when they go back to school. So one of the parents was talking to their teenager about it, and it was the parents' first time working in the school and going through this training, and they were very upset. And they talked to their teenager, and she said, you know, Mom, we're just so numb to this, I'm used to it. So there is a level of expertise, I hate to say that, but of younger people in some of these emergencies that we're talking about. And this really, really breaks my heart that it is one of them, but it is true. So part of the purpose of this policy, honestly, is catching up our church family and other generations who don't have to do this. I know there are workplaces who train in this too, but this is very similar to the training and advice that they are given in schools. So in case of just a suspected shooter, nothing confirmed, in case we're worried, we will go into a lockdown, which means that you should gather anybody around you. If it's on a Sunday morning, we're with kids, we're out here in the laws room, gather whoever you can. This is where it's important to feel empowered, all of you, to be leaders in the congregation and take leadership in these moments. Gather whoever you can and move to the safest place that seems safest. And this is where we can't write every single piece of advice for you all in every single part of our building. We have an elaborate building and there's too many variables. So this is where you need to know the basics and think through yourself. What are your physical abilities? Where physically are you in the building? What's around? Assessing your situation. That part is up to you. But so gathering people, bringing folks into classrooms, lock doors, close blinds, cover windows, interior windows especially, and cover the door if you have time. And try to maintain a calm atmosphere. That obviously is challenging, but especially if you are with children or other folks who are extra agitated, try to remain as calm as possible. And if you're working with children and adults, really try to be cognizant of their emotional needs in that moment. Again, this is something we hope we never have to think through, but do think through that a little bit. In this case, everyone is to stay in place until you hear an all clear signal from somebody in the church that you know, from the actual police. In school trainings, the kids are taught to not give away your location, to stay quiet if you're hiding somewhere, so that if it is not actually help that is arriving and asking you where you are, and it's somebody who's trying to harm you, you don't give away your location unnecessarily. So please be aware of that if you to assess whether it is actually safe to come out of that lockdown. We will do our best through some systems that we're working on in the church. We don't currently have a way to like send an intercom message throughout the church so that everybody could hear it, confirmed and say everything is safe, you can come out now. We're working on different ways to do that, but you would get some kind of message in that situation. So the procedure, if there is an active shooter, no matter where we are in the building, run is the first thing. If you're already in a safe-ish location, lock that location down. So you may not be running far. Think about that. If we are in the sanctuary, for example, we are going to want to scatter and run as far away separately from the sanctuary as possible. Don't clump together in small groups, and go wherever you can as fast as you can. The next part is hide. If you can't get away, or you are already somewhere that seems relatively safe, or a place that you're able to secure in a classroom, for example, turn off lights, close windows, blockade doors, set up things as much as you can for safety barriers, whatever is available. Do your best to be resourceful in those moments. And then as a last case scenario, is to fight. And ideally that would never happen again, but this is a last resort, and your chances are much greater of surviving that situation if you do fight back in that case. It's not advised, again, in some of those others where it may not get that serious, but we do want to, well, I just said all of that. We do want to keep that as a last resort and avoid it if possible. I just want to go through a few more of these points. These are all listed point by point in your policy. So again, do read through them. But a couple that I want to mention that I forgot in the running part: prevent others from entering the area if you know it's already dangerous. If people are scattering, they may not know, they don't want to run somewhere. So be aware of that. If you see law enforcement approaching or you're exiting the building, run, don't rush them, and run with your hands up so that they know that you're not the person that is doing the damage. Hopefully, so exit the building with hands up, showing any officers or anybody who's coming that you're not the one who's the threat. Follow their directions as best you can. Do not attempt to move wounded people. And again, in any point of any of this, call or text 911 whenever you assess it safest.
Got a question.
Yeah.
And you may be addressing this. Are there meetup points like that? Okay.
Kind of.
Okay.
Stephanie's question was if there are meetup points. And I did want to highlight that when we get into some of the other more normal evacuations, like if there's a fire, gas leak, something like that, we want to, our meetup point is the library, is this parking lot out here. everybody would exit the building and go to the parking lot. In this case, we do not have specific meetup points. You would exit the building and go as far as you can. And just keep going. There are safe places around, or the library, the armory, the Methodist church. Just go to somebody's house, run as far as you can. When we exit the building if you exited the building in the situation of an active shooter, you do not want to congregate in a group. You want to be as scattered as possible so that they have the least opportunity to inflict as much damage. So we don't want to run outside and all stand in the parking lot together. That wouldn't be the safest move for us in that case. We did talk about some of this already, but when hiding, again, silence your cell phone and remember that you can text or call. Don't answer the door for anyone until police or church leaders give it an actual all clear, and try to maintain a calm atmosphere. In thinking about making a safe place, you will, if you can, barricade doors, windows, things like that, and keep yourself low to the ground. If you run in a classroom, for example, if this was the door, you would want to all sit as close to this wall as possible, so that if someone comes in this door, you're not out here in front of them. It takes the most effort for them to get to you. So these are some of the things that we can give basic advice on. But again, you need to think through who you're with. What are their physical abilities? What is their mental and emotional ability in a moment of crisis? Where are you in the building? And there's different resources everywhere. So it's some of this you have to think through a bit. And again, fighting as a last resort. That's just if there's nothing else that can be done. It is advised to be aggressive, to be threatening in that situation, and do your best to defend yourself and other people. When reporting, this is all listed and I won't read all of them, but the summary of this is whether you're texting or calling 911, just pay attention to as many details as you can. And like Sunny said, they have emergency services in this county have a blueprint of our building. So you can tell them where in the building you are, give them as much information as you can, provide your location. Is it here in the church? Is it in the preschool? Any other details you can add. If you've seen the person who is a threat, try to remember as much as you can about what they're wearing, what they look like, especially visual clues that could help officers distinguish that person from the rest of you. If you know the type of weapon, how many shots have been fired, how long have they been there, how extensive is the damage or the situations, any kinds of things that you can remember are helpful information for them. So I want to pause there for just a second, and physically for myself and all of you, I invite you to take a breath and kind of shake out some of that energy, because it's hard to talk about. And we'll move on to something else super fun. Right? Yes.
Oh, just real quick, everybody write this too. Every door on the outside is numbered. You got them that you would run out of door and you need to call 911. So just inside door number 6, you just look at the door and they're all.
Yes, thank you. That is a great addition, and that's something fairly recent pre-pandemic that we did. All of the doors are numbered. When we give directions for things in the church, we try to be aware of that. And just to note, this is part of why doors are locked on Sunday mornings, on other times during the week, and that they have numbers, and we are aware of which ones are unlocked at different times and which ones are not. And we are always trying our very, very best to strike that balance between hospitality, being an open and welcoming place that feels good for all of us to be here and for new people to enter. But the other half of our responsibility there is keeping everybody as safe as possible. And sometimes some of the things that we have to do are inconvenient or frustrating, but that's part of why, and that's part of why, thank you, we have all the doors numbered, and that would help emergency services find you. To even in a less threatening emergency, if an ambulance needs to be called, it's a lot easier to tell them come to the door, whatever, than trying to navigate them around through the church.
Something we're taught at work, I don't know that this is necessarily natural for a lot of us. If you had to hide the bathrooms, you could gather people and go, whether it's the men's or the women's bathrooms, because typically you can lock them from the inside, but not all the doors in the building can be locked from the inside.
Yeah.
That's something we keep at our mindfulness.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna repeat that, just to be aware of that bathrooms can be a safe place to go because they're rooms that can be locked from the inside. We do have lots of doors around here that cannot be locked from the inside or that aren't regularly. So again, this is part of just going through this policy on your own time and thinking through a little bit, like, where are you frequently in the building? Do the doors lock there? Are there restrooms nearby? Just things like that. Any other questions on that before I move on?
When being pushed, I was always trained in the environments I worked in. Run, hide, and if you have to fight, don't fight fair. They don't fight fair, you
Yeah.
don't fight fair. And one of the things that I thought was brilliant was taking a fire extinguisher and using that, and it creates such a cloud, and it can really disrupt things. Really help.
Yeah,
And then after you're done, after it's all exhausted, you can use it as a throw or hit.
yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that so they can hear too. Just a reminder that if the fight situation does occur, the fire extinguishers can be useful in their whole use, causing confusion with the spray and distraction, but also they are heavy and could physically be used as a weapon. I want to add to that, it just made me think of this as saying to be aggressive, that I was just reading a study the other day that this is part of an extra difficulty for women to, in any case of being attacked, this one too, that we often don't scream or yell or act aggressive because it has been so ingrained in us to not respond that way. And in a lot of self-defense classes, the first thing that instructors will have you do is literally practice screaming and yelling and using your voice. So in this kind of situation, I love that. Don't worry about fighting fair. Don't worry about any of it, whether you're consciously worried about it or not. Do whatever you can to save yourself and other people, whether it's comfortable, whether it feels fair, whether it feels nice, any of that. And that's a hard thing to say in church, but you're completely right. So I'm gonna really kind of summarize some of this because we're already running. I want to leave some time for some other drills. But in the event of a bomb threat, this is one of the reporting forms that we have. Get as much information as possible. Obviously, call for help. Important one for this, don't use the fire alarm. I'm not sure we have handheld radios in here anymore, but don't use cell phones because their usage can accidentally trigger something if there was actually something here. If still not determined whether it's a real threat or a pretend threat, just be aware that you don't want to do extra things like that are using electricity or cell phones because they can accidentally trigger them. In case of this, again, is where it's really important for all of us who are ushers, elders, teachers, volunteers, just church members really, to be familiar with our building in case a child especially goes missing on Sunday morning. This could be something as simple and innocent as a kid got curious and started wandering around the building, and in this maze, they got lost and can't find their way back to their parents or to the adults that they were with. So notify, if ever a child is missing, notify me, notify staff people, notify their teacher, their parent, a volunteer, staff people especially, so that they can coordinate this looking. There needs to be somebody in the coordinating position is important. Their teacher will often know the most about them, where they were last, things like that. So that's a key person to involve. When you're looking, check all the rooms, cabinets, closets, and lots of child-sized hiding places. Sometimes they maybe think we're playing hide and seek when we're not. And there are lots of places to think about them seen as a cool place to go or a cool place to hide that we wouldn't necessarily. So get creative when you're looking for children.
I would just throw in that I lost my child at Walmart one time when she was tiny, and I literally I probably took my eyes off of her for 2 seconds. There was no way she could have gotten out of my sight. I became frantic. Turned out she was hiding on an empty lower shelf, right where I was, but she had crawled onto the lower shelf and I didn't see her there. So yes, to your point.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a child, get as creative as they are when you're trying to find them. If you get any information or find them, obviously notify the coordinating person, their teacher, volunteers, and staff. If the child is not found, it could be the case that it's something, it could still be just confusion and they're lost. It could, again, be something more serious, thinking back to the hostage situation that we mentioned earlier. It could be family conflict and a parent or another adult in the family or a parent's partner is in some argument and wants to take custody of the child without consent and a legal agreement on that. So if it's something like that, or it seems more serious, whoever, a staff member, after we've done some searching, would call 911, coordinate obviously information from whoever would know them best. If they have parents, grandparents, whoever their Sunday school teachers, whoever's here, give as much information as you can about the child and keep searching while law enforcement is coming and doing whatever they can do. Keep searching and notify staff or whoever is coordinating that if there are anything else that comes up. So I want to skip now to the natural and property emergency section and going to go briefly through this. And I want to say before we start, we will have, with this policy, we will be doing an actual fire drill and an actual tornado drill every year, right? Every year in the tornadoes in the spring, generally, Session and Safe Church will schedule this and the church will know it's happening. We're not going to just spring it on you some Sunday morning. So don't worry about that, but we do want to physically practice this at some point. Again, some of this is obvious, but we're at a church and we need to be aware of who's here, who's familiar with the building, who might need help exiting, all those kinds of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about if you were out shopping and Target had a fire or something like that. So we will be practicing those actual evacuations. If, and this is what I was saying earlier, if it's a fairly, I hate to say it, but more routine kind of evacuation, if there's a fire, something smells weird in the building, we think it might be a gas leak, something like that, and we need to evacuate the building, we go out here to this parking lot, everybody gather up so we can see that everyone's accounted for. And use your best judgment on what exits to use. We do have exit plans for different areas of the building, but this again is where it's really important for each of you individually to know where you might be on a Sunday morning and think about how to get out of there. Mary Ann has started drawing some of the plans for us.
And
Can
this
you
is really
step
rough.
up here so I can hear you online too.
This is a really rough opportunity, I guess, out of the sanctuary. And if there's anyone sitting here who could get on the computer and do it in a way that we could then print it, we'd really be grateful. We need it on a grid, in other words, but I did just put together
We have visual aids.
a visual aid to say what we would do if we were in worship on Sunday morning. And maybe you all can share.
Or if anyone watching online has those skills, that
skills, it would be helpful.
I have a volunteer.
Oh, fantastic.
Yay.
I was hoping that would happen. Oh, I think there is, oh, she'll come back in a second. Yeah, so this is a sanctuary example, but just take this as an example, I'm gonna go through a couple of places to evacuate here in a second. This may actually be the next one. But, think about, if you're all the way down in the front of the sanctuary, your exit's gonna be different. It's kind of like if you're on an airplane. Be aware of where your closest exit is. You know where some of them are, but where are you that day? And where's the closest one to you? And think about if there's gonna be folks sitting in those areas that could use help too. Oh, I do also want to say before I forget, when working with the children, many of you may have seen, we have red binders that have sign in and sign out sheets for the kids in them. As we're coming back to school now and bringing Sunday school back regularly, we're going to get in the habit of using those again all the time because we have more kids in and out. But that's a normal practice for us here at church, that every group of kids that meets, they're different age binders for them. And every Sunday, or whatever the activity is, their parents will sign them in, and then their parent or other approved adults that we know of, are safe adults, will sign them out. And if anything happens, if it's a fire, even just a drill, any of that stuff, kind of like being in a school classroom, you take your class list with you wherever you go. It has their parents' phone numbers. It has, if they have allergies, normal stuff, or if you're volunteering, which I also highly encourage everybody to do, because we need it, and these kids are super fun and will make you feel better about life. But it has all of their information in it. So if you exit and have a group of kids, whether you have their parents' phone number in your phone or not, you'll have it with you in the binder. So you can find who they need to go home with and who they're safe with. And you'll know exactly how many are accounted for and if there's anybody that needs to be searched for. So that's the case in all of these plans. Tornadoes, if have lived in Indiana for any amount of time, you're fairly familiar with tornado procedures. There are obviously some places in this building that would be safer than others. The safest would be to go downstairs, away from these doors and the exits. The basement, the dungeon downstairs is the teenage youth group room. Downstairs places would be safest. So that can take a while to get to, depending on where you are in the sanctuary or where you are in the church. So be aware of that as well.
And be aware of the fact that if there's someone in the sanctuary in a wheelchair, or someone in the sanctuary who just has mobility difficulties, if they can't get downstairs by themselves, depending on what the situation is, they can get downstairs in the elevator, or they could shelter in these restrooms right here.
Severe earthquake is, I think, less possible than, less likely that we would experience than a tornado, but we have had earthquakes here in Indiana. Just had a little one a while back. So just a reminder, you drop to the floor, cover up with whatever you can, and hold your position. If you're inside, stay inside. If you're outside, stay outside. Try to stay away from things that may fall, from glass that may break. A lot of those same things you would try to avoid in a tornado. And then I'll leave it to you all to read through what to do after, because I want to save some time for more questions and to get through a couple other plans here. Flash flood. Try to be aware of weather conditions approaching. Hopefully we wouldn't be in a case where we all got stranded here, but monitor conditions. If you hear of anything, let staff people or elders that are coordinating an event know. Consider different routes on how to get out of here if that was the case. And we do have a lot of records and things like that we may would be good if we didn't lose in an emergency, if it was possible to save them, old session records, things like that. So in the event that anything like that was possible or happened, just to be aware. So fire in case of a fire, this one I think feels pretty familiar to most people, but familiarize yourself with the building again. I know I've said that like 20,000 times already, but really can't emphasize it enough. Pull the fire alarm, call 911 if you can. If our fire alarm goes off, they will get the signal there, but it helps them to know that it's not an accident, it's a real thing, and they need to get here quick. Send as much information as you can. In that instance, warn others, use the fire extinguisher for actual fire extinguishing, if that's a possibility. And if not, and even in that case, evacuate. This is a case where we all just go outside and meet in the library parking lot. And this is where, if you're teaching, it would be super important, again, to take the red binder with you if you're teaching or volunteering, so that you know you have all your kids and that their parents and families can come pick them up. So we do have some advice in here for evacuating from the sanctuary, from the classroom, and the laws room, because they would all be slightly different. Similar idea, similar location we're getting to, but we do want to give you a little bit more specific advice. You can gather in the back parking lot also, but the idea would eventually be to all get together so we can make sure that everybody's accounted for, whether you have somebody signing you into class or not. We hope we are aware of who we've seen at church or at the event or whatever the case may be. Deacons and elders in particular in these situations, in any emergency, but fire, any kind of evacuation especially, it's your honor and your duty to help other folks evacuate. So whether that's just saying, hey, everybody, the closest exit's here, follow me, or whether it's getting physical help for somebody to move them as quickly as possible. Do please be ready to help coordinate that. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for that one. This one's fairly straightforward too. If there's a gas leak or a chemical spill, get away from it, get out of the area, call for help, depending on the level of emergency, 911, or one of those variety of numbers that's in the very back of your packet. That's where that stuff comes in too. And equipment failure, electrical failure, if the elevator doesn't work, if there's flooding or plumbing issues, a lot of this stuff is common sense, but do please read through it too. And remember that all those numbers are in the back of this policy. So if you don't know where the boiler room is to get to the emergency shut off or things like that, which is not fun to know and it's hard to find. It's not a super easy process. This we're not going to read through, but it is in there for specifically how to shut off the fire alarm, for example, if it goes off when it's not supposed to be off, how to shut off the sprinkler system if it goes off when it doesn't actually need to be. The electrical breaker panel locations and functions are also in here, and they tell you, the policy tells you where all those things are located. So that could be a bit of a scavenger hunt for you sometime when you need something else to do, walk around the church, make sure you know where a lot of these places are. Obviously, there's some of us that are here more frequently or would be more familiar with some of these systems. So knowing who those people are, that may just be your easiest bet, is finding somebody that knows all of this already. But all of these things are in here just in the event that it's needed.
And we will post, I think, maybe the whole policy or maybe pieces of it on the bulletin boards, maybe the whole thing, on some of the bulletin boards around the church, just so that if something happens and you need to find something out right away, we have that handy for us.
I think, Sonny, I would also recommend that you have one at each of the two back doors of the sanctuary, because that's where ushers are.
Great idea.
I think, there's the medical emergencies and all that still to go, but I will leave most of this, the rest of this to you all to read through. What I do want to highlight though, before I finish talking and leave. Oh, I'm sorry, what, I missed it.
At the
that we're gonna have these policies throughout the church, and we'll put some by the doors to the sanctuary where the ushers are. So that that if you're an usher, you would have access to this quickly if you need to look something up. Thank you, Janet. Along those same lines, last thing I want to highlight is where other things are in need in the situation of an emergency. We have a plethora of first aid kits throughout the church. They're located in the office, kitchen, gym, nursery, large youth room, and the youth group dungeon. I also have some in my office right now. I think we have some backups Brooke has in the office as well, but those are important things, locations to know also.
Actually, since we wrote this, we have also added a first aid kit next to each defibrillator unit, AED, one right around the corner here outside the sanctuary and one in the gym. There's also been added a first aid kit right next to the AED, and in every AED case, there is also a stop the bleed kit if that needs to be used with tourniquets and all that.
So, yeah, so there are more locations we've added first aid kits to that need to be added to the policy. And then the last thing was that what Sunny already mentioned, that I was gonna mention, we do have defibrillators in multiple locations in the church, and there are first aid kits with them. And in addition to the defibrillator and first aid kit, we have particular kits that are used to stop excessive bleeding quickly, the Stop the Bleed kit. So those are available and quickly accessible as well. I think I want to stop here in case,
I wanted to say something.
yeah, Mary Ann.
This is not the first policy that this group has written. And we really owe Marietta and Sunny a big thank you, because we've been doing this for what, 6 years, 7 years?
Not this particular
No, not just the
policy.
policy, but the policies to create a safe environment for the church. And, you know, I just kind of proofread, provided some food now and then, but they really have carried, and it's not easy to do this kind of work. It's not fun kind of work, all this, so, thank you both.
Yeah, and thanks to Mary Ann, I think she did a little, I'll let you know, she did a little bit more than just proofread. She did also feed us at her house. We also will meet sometimes at Upland at fun places. So when I say that this work may not be fun, very lucky that the committee itself is quite fun and they make this work fun. And I'm very, very grateful that we have been able to have this team together to put these policies together. So that hopefully all of these things are much simpler, easier to find, easier to update or alter if things need to be, and can help as much as possible.